Hello, I'm Gavin Horgan, headmaster of Millfield School in Somerset, the largest co-educational boarding school in the UK. Welcome to the Millfield Way Podcast. Here, you'll hear from teachers, coaches and students from Millfield and Millfield Prep School. Millfield is traditionally different, and this is the Millfield Way.
Hello and welcome to this Millfield Way podcast in conversation with the Girls in Sport Committee. Our names are Lara, Eden, Evie and Kitta. We will be discussing the Millfield Girls in Sport programme.
So, what have we done last year? What have we achieved last year?
We managed to change quite a bit of the kit into girls specific because it was originally unisex. So we managed to change it so that the cut fit the girls better when they were doing sport.
We also welcome specialist bra fitters who kind of help girls understand the importance of having a correctly fitting sports bra and how it can aid their sports performance.
And the bathrooms around school are now fully stocked with period products and coaches are fully equipped with products for away games.
And talking about periods, there used to be white shorts under skirts, but those were swapped out for blue in September 22 in football, rugby and hockey over concerns of periods.
And also last year, the school hosted parent webinars with the Well HQ aimed at starting conversations about supporting girls at home as well as at school. Why do we think this is important?
I think it's really important that parents know what we're getting up to within school so that they can feel happy and they feel supported that their children are being supported within the school, because I think we're at school all the time and it's important.
Yeah, and especially since we're a boarding school, there are so many international students whose parents, they live in a different country, there's a different time zone, so they don't always get to catch up with their children. So I think having webinars is such a good way to connect with your children at school, even if you can't physically speak to them.
I also think sometimes parents maybe get a bit frustrated with the media coverage, or they hear their child or daughter complaining about, oh, the kit doesn't fit me right. So I think when they have these talks and they hear, we are trying to change it, we're doing this, we're doing that, I think it's also just very reassuring that they know, yeah.
To hear, Girls in Sport podcast coming from the girls in sport at school, it's a reassurance for the parents that stuff is getting done.
Something that's really positive, in my opinion, that's changed is that there are now girls-specific changing rooms at King Weston at the football playing pitches, because before we used to have to share facilities with the boys. So it's really positive that we now have our own changing rooms. And obviously this is a massive step from a couple of years ago when the girls used to have to play on Keen's Elm pitch and weren't even allowed to play at King Weston.
Yeah. Which is obviously where all the football happens, because there are so many football pitches there.
I believe there's 13 football pitches. And there's one at school, so it's very nice.
And there's no floodlights up at Keen's Elm, so when it would get too dark, they'd have to cut training short. I remember that when I used to play football.
I think another positive thing the school has done last year, they held a summer inset coaching for staff on how to make talking about menstrual cycles easier for students. I think this is definitely important for girls at school. As we said earlier, the international students, for them it's easier as their parents aren't here. And for girls in general throughout the school, it's important to talk about it, because, especially if you're doing sport, because it can make you feel certain ways and it's due to your menstrual cycle.
Yeah, my coach, I've definitely seen a switch almost. Because all of my fencing kit is white, so it's really important that I kind of speak to him about it, because it can make girls really anxious. And that has an effect on your sport. So I think I've definitely seen a change in the general. For me, my fencing coaches in general, they're just more comfortable speaking about it. And I think that's really good.
The comfortability, being comfortable in uncomfortable situations is so important.
Yeah.
For boys, girls, teachers, especially in a boarding school, it's really important.
Yeah.
Students and staff have attended talks as well last year about the menstrual cycle and how this affects girls' sporting experience and development, and they have been educated on nutrition and REDS, which stands for Relative Energy Deficiency in Sport, where energy deficiencies can impact female health and well-being.
I think it's really important because I think a lot of female athletes in this school were underfueling without even realising it, because I think a lot of the, in a way, nutrition standards are based around men, and that's what we learn is a lot of the research into like different sporting diets is actually just based off men and doesn't actually apply to women at all. So I think these talks were massive for female athletes actually understanding what their body needs.
I think, I know for athletics, we have nutritionists that we can speak to about our food that we eat and the intake that we have. So I think this is like really important, and it's really good that the school have recognised this and are educating people on it.
Why is having the committee important to us? And why is our school from year 9 to upper 6th, why is the programme important to every year group?
I think it's so important to have a wide spread of girls from year 9 to upper 6th, so that we get a voice from each year.
Yeah.
And as the reps, like everyone's a rep in their house, and it's important to hear the voices of each girl within the whole school.
I also think on this podcast, each of us, we all do a different sport. And so it's cool and it's nice to bring in all these different sports and have different views on how girls in sport are portrayed in our specifics.
Definitely.
And what I really like about it as an upper is like knowing that when I leave the school, the girls that join will have a better sporting experience than I did. And I think that's something really positive, that it's continuing to improve.
Especially in such a, sports-dominated school, it's important to have coverage.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Do you think it would be beneficial to offer the workshops to the boys to increase their awareness?
I think so. I think it's important for boys to understand and to empathise with the girls and what we go through our menstrual cycles. Like most boys will have a mum, a sister, a cousin, and so I think it's important to understand and to empathise with what goes on in our girl life.
And I think we also need a boy's kind of point of view on it as well, just so that we know that if we're changing something and they're not comfortable with it, then we can adapt it so that everyone is happy.
Yeah, the boys' voice is so important, as well as the girls.
Yeah.
And I also think it's important that the boys understand we're not trying to take opportunities away from them. It's just about levelling the playing field for everyone and just making it a better environment for everyone. And that's why, like you guys all said, their voice is still really important in this conversation.
100%.
Why do you think that the school didn't make specific sports kit when redesigning from cookery? Because I think it's such an important thing, because the redesign was only, a few years ago, and girls in sport was very much around, and the female movement within sport to improve it was, a whole thing. But it took school over 1.5 years to realise that they needed to change it from unisex to, boys and girls.
I don't really know why the school did it. I think it's a shame, but I think they're learning from their mistakes and they're improving it, and they've done that by creating the girl-specific kit. I assume they were under the impression it was unisex, when in fact it was just for the male body, but they've learned from that and they have changed it. As someone who plays football, we used to play in practically a parachute because we play in the boys' kit that was way too big for us. So having the new kit is really nice. It's a shame that it took a while, but it's still a positive step forward.
Yeah, I know with having conversations with the school shop that they're really quick to adapting all of the kit, which is really good. I think it's good to kind of change the mistakes that were made so that everyone feels comfortable when they're doing sport.
I definitely think with the Girls in Sport platform that we now have, it's easier to allow our voices to be heard. Whereas before, I think it was more difficult for people to speak up because they didn't really know how to. But now that we have this Girls in Sport committee, it's easier to get our opinions and ideas across, and the school has made a really good effort to develop our ideas and help them come true.
Yeah, I think we were just kind of missing the bridge of communication because we just didn't really know who the relevant people were to approach on these situations, but Mr. Coombs has really helped us out in that area.
We didn't know what was wrong with it at the time. When we moved away from cookery and we got this whole new kit, I don't think anyone was really... we thought maybe it fit a bit weirdly, but we didn't really understand that it was different and that it was supposed to be different, until I remember we had a talk come in and talk about girls in sport and how the sports kit should be different and it shouldn't be unisex. And I think that's when school realised that there needs to be a change.
I think with this Girls in Sport community, we're trying to emphasise that media coverage and recognition is important for the girls over the 28 sports that we do. We don't get as much coverage as the boys, but with this Girls in Sport committee, we are trying our best to boost that and get us on the media.
Yeah, I think it's really important on accounts such as Millfield Rugby, where Millfield is known to be a rugby school. You know, it's something that people love about Millfield. And just giving the girls the same opportunities as the boys, not only on media, but, you know, on training facilities and what they get to do.
Yeah, I think the Millfield Netball do really well with their coverage, and I think that sports need to kind of have the same, not the same amount, but the same content which promotes girls' sport, so that people can really get involved and see what we're all doing.
Yeah, and same with hockey. Hockey's very equal with girls and boys posting, because obviously both genders, or, you know, the genders play the sports, and it's on the Instagram, you can see that there's a very equal playing field of boys getting posted and girls getting posted.
I think the issue more lies with the sports where it's like a male-dominated sport. Like you said, with rugby and football, there is typically less coverage of the girls, but I think it is definitely improving, and I know it's in consideration from now on to post more of the girls. So I think that's a really positive step. Males get asked questions on their recent success and are praised in interviews, and women are asked about their love life or subjects not related to sport, such as their outfits. Why do we think this is?
I think it's hard for people to realise that, you know, at one point sport was a very male-dominated, you know, environment. And I think in the last 50 years, you've really seen a change, and you've seen women come up and do incredible things in sport. And I think for some people, they get a bit uncomfortable, and they don't know how to go around and what to ask. And it's not even in the sports industry. It's also in sort of the movie industry. You see the women get sexualised, and with what they wear in the films, and then the men are getting asked about, you know, their heroes and what they do and the stunts they perform. There's just a huge divide between the two.
For me, in the media coverage, in female field events in track and field aren't covered as much as male field events. However, the divide between male and female on the track is very much equal. Like key stars like Dina Rasher-Smith, Shelley-Ann Fraser-Price, they're very much on par with like the Usain Bolts of the world. So I think the coverage in track and field is quite good.
Yeah, I also agree. Coverage for sports such as tennis and swimming, I feel like it's almost equal with how much they're covered. Maybe not as much, there's still a bit of a gap. But compared to sports like rugby, I personally, and you know, this shows that even we have stuff to improve on. I couldn't name you 5 female rugby players, but I could name you at least 10 male rugby players. And it's a thing of media coverage, because they do it at a different time, they've got a different viewership, and it's just about getting it out there and making people understand that, you know, there is a Women's Rugby World Cup, there's not just a Rugby World Cup.
Yeah, and I think if you look at, for example, the Lionesses, I think their viewership and support has grown massively since the Euros and in the World Cup. I think a lot more people were tuning into women's football, and I just think it's a shame it doesn't translate across to rugby as well, but hopefully steps are being taken to progress in that area, because the Roses are currently undefeated, and I think that's something that should be celebrated, because arguably they're doing what the men can't. So.
Yeah. Also, I've just got this question just popped into my head about, you know, how you've got the NBA, you've got the World Cup, you've got the Football World Cup. Why is it that some things are labelled with a W before them? So you've got the WNBA for women's basketball, and for the Rugby World Cup, it's not the Rugby World Cup, it's the Women's Rugby World Cup. Why do you think that there is that divide in name? Like something as small as a name, but can have such a big difference.
I think because of history. I think there's barriers that have been built up over time, and obviously the Rugby World Cup was created way before the Women's Rugby World Cup was. And so people aren't creative enough to get a name to come up with. But I think that's through history, and I think if we keep on pushing as a society to equalise this, like this name calling of the events, I think over time we can change it. We can come up with our own name.
And they happen at different times, so it's not even like you have to distinguish them, because it's not like the Women's World Cup will be at the same time as the Men's World Cup. So you could easily just say the World Cup.
Yeah.
So hopefully that will change in the near future.
Yeah.
Did any of you see recently that the Man United executive refused to pass a trophy to Alessia Russo because it was too heavy? What do you think this shows us about how far football is behind with sexism in sport?
I think it's, aside from rugby, I think it's really behind. I think just how they generally publicise stuff, and during their ceremonies of awards, I mean, I know it took until 2018 for them to come up with a women's award, which I think is just ridiculous. I think that not being able to give someone a trophy because it's too heavy is ridiculous.
It also plays into that whole, thing you're said as a kid where boys are stronger than girls.
Yeah,
and,
exactly.
if you're in a classroom, I need a strong boy to help me get something down from the shelf. It's the whole thing of why can't the girls do it? They're not strong enough.
Yeah,
But that's completely untrue.
And these are professional athletes.
Yeah.
Like, they live in gyms.
Yeah.
I think she can lift a trophy.
Yeah, I think it almost takes away from her success, because then media coverage is then Alessia Russo couldn't
was
lift
refused.
the trophy,
Yeah.
which I think is really sad. That then takes away from her
Accomplishment.
Yeah, and then they cover the men's, and if that happened to a man, which it wouldn't, but if it did, it wouldn't be covered in the same way.
It also, imagine just how she was so excited to win this award, and then it took an immediate down on her achievement just because she was told a little comment about how, a man can hold it but a woman can't. It's not just the words, but it's also just the, in society. Yeah, the connotation.
I think it happens to women a lot, because I remember when Serena Williams came back from having her child and won Wimbledon, and they were like, oh, and this is after she gave birth, but they would never say that about a man. Like, they would never be like, oh, this is after he's had a surgery. Well, maybe a surgery, but they wouldn't say it about
it's the same
anything like that. They wouldn't take away from their accomplishments in the same way.
And say she can do it and she's had a child. Like she's saying that it's almost like it's kind of patronising in a way.
Yeah.
It's like she's had a child and she's doing this. It's like, no, she can just do that regardless of having a child.
Yeah, she can just do both.
that.
Yeah, it's almost that it should actually be praised that she's come back and she's managed to do that. And I mean, it's something that men can't experience. And I think also with the Alessia Russo, I think it's really sad that it's her past club, but I think it's her club that did this action, and I think it's almost like betrayal. You would expect your own club, who's kind of your family, to be supportive rather than almost drag down your success.
And in the official's apology, he stated how he didn't when he said it, he didn't realise it was wrong, and I think that's a big part of the issue, that he doesn't even realise that that's an issue in saying that.
100%. I think it's within history again. It'll be an older official, and
he was.
It's like knowing when and when to say the wrong and right things. I think that's, as a female in sport and in society, it's people can say the wrong things and not mean it in a mean way.
Yeah, and people. Sorry.
No, it's okay.
People can say it's a generational gap, or that they weren't taught the same things as a child. But everybody can change.
Yeah.
Everybody can advance.
Society adapts, so you should too.
Yeah, everyone can.
You shouldn't wait it out.
I mean, the 2023 figure is that 82% of women in football have experienced discrimination at work, and this is up from 66% in 2020. And I just struggle to figure out why this is still going up, especially after the Lionesses' success at the World Cup final and winning the Euros in 2020.
I think it's the whole, in my head, it's as soon as women start speaking up and about women in sport, girls in sport. So when people then start to backtrack and go, well, we've given them too much, now let's go back.
Yeah.
And so as soon as you make a little bit of progress, it then completely diminishes and goes back down.
I think it's really sad that in 3 years it's gone up by that much. Like, it's not even a 1 or 2% change. It's over 10%, which I think is crazy.
I almost wonder if it's a sort of internalised jealousy from the men, because I think like the women are succeeding so massively in the sense that they won the Euros, which the men haven't done in years. They came second in the final of the World Cup, and the women's rugby team are undefeated, and all these sort of massive accomplishment for women's teams. I almost wonder if they're almost a bit jealous of the women.
I hear it all the time where it's, oh, yeah, but they won it, but it's because they're women. Like, they were.
It's not as easy.
It's like, well, no, it's not.
The whole thing. If we
women
played
against
them,
women.
Yeah.
like our third team played against them, we'd win. It's like, well,
it's like,
how do you know that?
But equally, we're all biologically different.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
You
No,
can't,
exactly.
it's
It
not
just
a
has to be
comparison.
accepted.
There is
thing.
no comparison, really.
I think I hear it even in my own sport, in fencing, where it's, oh, well, you beat me, yeah, but you're a girl, so, you know, it doesn't count.
It's like,
well,
why
yeah,
does
it
that
does
count?
actually. In fact, it makes it more successful almost.
Yeah.
That
Like how he would then view it is
Yeah.
more like, oh, that's, I'm not
It's
going to
just a
mention she was a girl.
practice.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
They've got the whole like, you know, toxic masculinity where they don't
exactly.
want to be beaten by a girl.
What do you think about the recent football ceremony being held in the middle of the women's international football window?
I personally think it's such a shame. Players like Georgia Stanway, who have worked really, really hard and were nominated for the award, weren't able to attend due to having a match the following day. Even the winner of the Ballon d'Or, she had to leave straight away to fly back to, I think it was Switzerland, for a match the next day. And I just think that's such a shame, because I don't think any of the men had that sort of time constraint or
priority.
Yeah,
they need to
priority.
go back to. But it's weird that they organise such an event in the heart of, you know, women's international football when they would never do that for the men's.
No.
They would purposely make sure it's at the end of the season so they don't disrupt anything. And I think it's crazy that they don't think about that for the women's, or maybe they did, but it didn't happen. I don't know.
Yeah, and the women's award was given by a male tennis player, which I think is ridiculous because it's a football award ceremony.
Yeah.
And even if it was a tennis player, why wouldn't you have Serena Williams, who's
fought for women's rights? Yeah.
Like, to change the colour of the Wimbledon, playing
Uniform.
kit.
Yeah.
Exactly. I think it's
Have a voice.
Yeah, it really. And then again, the media coverage is about that rather than, wow, she won an award, how amazing she played.
Success.
It's now over the fact that it's a male tennis player, which I think is ridiculous.
I mean, the article that I read about it even said, like, if it had to be a male tennis player, why wouldn't it be Andy Murray? Andy Murray,
Yeah,
who's like a massive feminist, and he really supports the cause, and he was very vocal about another controversy in women's football way back when, I can't quite remember, but I just think it was a poor choice of.
And it's imagine receiving such an award and then looking yourself up online to see what people are saying about the award, and all they can say is about the person who gave you the award.
Yeah, it
And
takes
that
away
takes
from
away
what
all of your
you've
success.
earned. Like, it's years and years. Like, as athletes
work.
within the school, I think people can relate to working hard to something and achieving that, but then it getting taken away because someone else is taking your spotlight.
Actually, to add on what you were saying earlier about how it's like the Women's World Cup, they named the award the Ballon d'Or Feminine. Like, it can't even just be Ballon d'Or.
Yeah.
Like,
And
I don't see why it has to be Ballon d'Or Feminine. Like, it can just go to a woman as well. Like, there can be two Ballon d'Ors.
Yeah. But they feel like they have to relate everything to then be a woman's thing, so that it feels separate from the men's.
They have to label it as almost as it's not important.
It's like, oh, did you win the Ballon d'Or? No, I won the Ballon d'Or Feminine. What difference does the name make? Why does it need to be there?
Yeah.
And they have loads of other awards for the men as well. Like, I think it's like the best goalkeeper and striker and stuff like that. But they don't have that for the women as well. And I just think that's a bit of a shame, because if you look at Mary Earps, who's the Lioness's goalkeeper. She's had a fantastic season. She is the only goalkeeper to save a penalty in the World Cup final, and that was not celebrated or commented on in any way, shape or form, and I think that's a massive shame.
Yeah, I think she was celebrated right after the World Cup, which I think was important, but I think
it was a bit late.
Their loss at the World Cup almost shadowed her success. And they almost should have celebrated it afterwards, so that she really had a chance to be celebrated.
And the fact that women don't have the best striker, best goalkeeper, it then takes away not only that you can't win it, but then also your effort levels. You think, well, there's nothing to work for. You can work for, a title at a World Cup, but if you've lost that World Cup, then you kind of feel a bit empty. But the men then get all these separate awards that they can all fight. They can all fight for. But
and they can sit in the ceremony and really enjoy it because they're not worried about having to get onto the next flight to Switzerland. They're sat there and they're able to praise each other, and yet the women, half of the women footballers weren't there, and they're not able to
share it with each other.
Exactly.
Team. You thrive from your team,
and not just only a team, like a community. The women looking out 100%. For each other, even if they're not in the same teams. But you couldn't really do that as it was.
No, you can imagine how lonely it must have been just there and not being able to go.
And then to get on a flight back, most likely on your own or maybe with someone else, but no one who you really want to spend it with, which would be your teammates.
What are we looking forward to doing this year, and what do we hope to achieve as a group?
I think the main thing is just making everyone more aware. I think we've really got a good foundation currently, but I think we just really need to build on it. I think the point we made at the beginning of trying to get the boys involved and trying to
see their view
exactly will help, because I think, we've almost got a barrier at the moment where we're just talking to the female community and we're trying to speak to members of staff to adapt things like school uniform and school kit, and now we need to get past that and kind of be speaking to male pupils as well.
I also think using the facilities more. So stuff like the first team pitch, it's at most maybe used twice a week for matches, but I think if we maybe expanded that, and especially for girls sport as well, in rugby and in football, that you can then play on it more often, and so you can celebrate, first team rugby matches are always a school event that everybody wants to go and watch.
I think also with the school's facilities, we have a lot of amazing links to amazing athletes out in the world, and I think it'd be amazing to have them come into the school and hear talks from them, because I think it'd be really inspiring for not only female athletes but also male athletes. I think any top athlete telling you things would be great.
Amazing to hear. I think I hope that we can have like a coming out party as a committee to showcase what we've done. I think this podcast is another big step for us, for everyone to hear what we've been discussing in our group. But I also think having lots of guests, as Keita said, have guests to come in and talk about women in sport, girls in sport, and for everyone to hear what you can achieve.
And I think it's also just changing, our society and school, but also the wider society of the language we use as well. Because we don't need to be, labelling awards and fixtures and saying even small comments during a game session of, well, you're a girl. I think that really needs to stop in school and in general. I think that's really important.
I think as a committee, we're making the right path. We're taking the right path to change the narrative for girls in sport.
I hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Millfield Way Podcast in conversation with girls in sport. Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye.